The Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Patterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Redmond-Waldeyer, the new poetry director, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. I want to thank my predecessor, Maria Mazziotta-Gillen, for her years of leadership and vision. And I also want to thank Dr. Steve Rose, president of Passaic County Community College, for his continued support of the arts. Welcome to today's reading with Edvige Giunta, author of Writing with an Accent, contemporary Italian-American women authors, and co-editor of 6 anthologies, including The Milk of Almonds, Italian-American writers on food and culture, and Talking to the Girls, intimate and political essays on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire. Recipient of the 2023 Susan Koppelman Awrad for Best Anthology in Feminist Studies in American and Popular Culture, and recently published in Italy by Iacobelli. Her memoirs, essays, poems, and interviews appear in numerous anthologies, journals, and magazines. At New Jersey City University, where she is the professor of English, she teaches courses on memoir, on the Triangle Fires, and a range of literature and writing classes. In her workshop earlier today, she asked us to think about memoir, the way poets think about memory, how the stories that shape us rise through image and emotion. She talked about the interplay between voluntary memory and the deeper involuntary memories that surface when we give them room. She pointed to Maria Mazziotta-Gillen's poetry as an example of memory at work, poems grounded in her life as a daughter, a mother, a grandmother, trusting the past to speak and letting those stories lead the way. And she reminded us that memoir explodes the notion of time, allowing past and present to meet on the page. With that, I'm delighted to turn things over to Edvige for the reading. Welcome.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for having me in this part of this wonderful series, and congratulations to Maria and congratulations to you. The Poetry Center has been doing wonderful work for so many years. I really created a home for writers and lovers of literature. I had so much fun in today's memoir workshop with such a generous and involved participant, and now I have the pleasure of reading from some of my work. And I've been thinking a lot about speculative memoir, which is something that I realized I've been doing for much longer than I thought, long before I had a name for it. And speculative memoir seems an ideal genre for those of us who write intergenerational memoirs and so interrogate the past, inviting the ghosts of ancestors and asking them that they come, they join us and tell us some stories, maybe a few secrets. But I also find that the speculative memoir is especially suited for the childhood memoir. A genre like the speculative memoir that allows, not just allows, but welcomes, embraces the fantastic, the supernatural, is perfect for telling stories that captures the way in which children experience the world. Not only because for children, the divide between the real and the fantastic is really slippery. And the fantastic as a reality that's even more profound and emotionally involved than what we call the real, but also because when our adult selves try to capture the emotional experience of the child, we may fail to do so unless we embrace this welcoming of the supernatural and the fantastic. So, which is a little bit what happens in this memoir of mine that was published in the Adroit Journal, and it's called The Summer of the Orphans. We roamed the woods at dawn, the wild summer without man. It was a summer of orphans and wolves. Some of us still had baby teeth. We had been warned not to steal from the Mother Superior's grove, but we did, and cracked almonds with our teeth. We washed away the green fuzz that stuck to our teeth and sucked the juice of unripe almonds. Pine nuts were harder to crack. Still, we gathered them, held them gingerly between our young molars, then pressed hard, squinting. We could crack everything, even a red moon night. Piazza Armerina was the navel of Sicily. The islanders who lived there knew nothing of the patina of salt that coated the bodies of the Sicilians who lived near the sea, of the grains of sand that sparkled between our toes, of the smooth and ridged shells we collected to make necklaces, of telline, tiny clumps we scooped up from under the wet sand, squatting at the edge of the sea. That quiet, wild summer I turned 9, we didn't crack telline open with our fingernails to suck the mollusk inside with a swoosh and return the empty shells to the sea. That was the summer of forests and mysterious creatures. There was a body of water near Piazza Armerina, the Lake of Pergusa, where once upon a time the earth had opened. Hades had emerged on a chariot drawn by wild horses and grabbed Persephone. He had dragged her deep inside the earth. A dozen nuns and 60 boys lived in the austere building of the orphanage, less than a 5-minute walk from our little cabin. There was no room for grown men that summer. I loved the pomegranates, but I knew men were not to be trusted. Boys were different, especially orphan boys who picked the almonds too high for us to reach and promised to show us werewolves on a full moon night. Every day we woke up at 5 a.m., drank small bowls of caffè latte with which we dipped day-old bread, then went on long, dreamy walks in the woods. We wore light sweaters but no socks with our sandals. The 7 of us walked in formations that dissolved and reformed, then dissolved again, a crisscross of horizontal and vertical lines on that pristine land. My mother, my aunt, and my older sister took turns carrying the baby, though she mostly stayed in my mother's arms, wrapped in a cocoon of blankets made fierce by love and the terror of loss. The sky was barely visible through the thickness of the branches that roofed the forest. The trees were ancient and magnificent and housed countless birds that chirped louder when we passed, as if to warn each other of the arrival of newcomers. Invisible owls hooted, but only before sunrise. Then their hooting quieted, and other bird sounds filled the forest. When we'd hear flapping of wings above us, we looked up to spy on the birds that hid in the trees. These trees were different from the trees in our farmhouse in Gela, many of which my parents had planted. Our trees were young and cheerful. They waited for us with their branches loaded with oranges, tangerines, apricots, plums, figs, pears. Our arms could reach up to gather the fruit, or we could easily climb up the trunks and sit on the branches. Our oldest tree, an apricot, held a swing of rope and wood. I pumped my legs hard and pushed myself higher and higher to the rhythm of the tree yielding to my weight. The trees in this forest were not playful. They were solemn and reserved. The dawn air was wet and fragrant with the pungent smell of pines. We inhaled deeply. I closed my eyes and pictured my little sister's lungs healing. We had never been in a forest before, and I was anxious to find white spotted red mushrooms like those in fairy tale books. But the mushrooms that sprouted on the ground and even on the trunks of trees were brown-hued, and their cups were not perfectly round. They looked like small animals that did not move because we were watching. My mother warned us not to touch them. Here and there we bent to gather pine cones that beckoned at us from the exposed roots of giant trees that reached towards our feet like enormous gnarled fingers. We searched for the tiny ovals of pine nuts that peeked through the leaves and moss that carpeted the forest. My mother told us to be careful not to break our teeth, and so we put the pine nuts in our pockets, but sometimes we ignored her and cracked them open with our teeth, hungry for the delicious insides. We wandered away from the epicenter that was our mother, but never lost sight of her. Our voices echoed, mingled with the haunting calls of birds, the sound of crushed leaves and broken branches, and the cries of mysterious creatures who never revealed themselves to us. The trees followed the wind and hummed in harmony with the forest. The air filled with a crescendo of voices, then all sound dissolved into an eerie calm. I loved the pine forest, but would have never ever wanted to be there at night or alone. In the late afternoon, around 5, my mother made us wash and wear clean clothes, and we walked to the orphanage. She and my aunt visited with the nuns in the back of the building. The Mother Superior, a tall, serious woman, spoke to us kindly and calmly, enunciating her impeccable Italian. With the boys, she was not mean, but not gentle either. She spoke to them quickly and in dialect. I was curious about the nuns, their private lives, what they hid underneath those long, dark habits. Was it true that they shaved their heads? Did they get undressed in front of other nuns? What did their underwear look like? We rarely went inside the building, but once I saw one of the rooms where the nuns slept. It was so plain they made me sad. Not a photograph, not a painting or a knick-knack. I never saw the boys' dormitory. Although it was hard to differentiate the nuns because they all wore the same habit, I learned to recognize them from their height and their voices. There was a hierarchy. Some of the nuns were busy with chores and the children, while others sat quietly or walked with their arms and hands folded. An ancient-looking nun sat on a chair outside. She was deaf and still like a statue, except for one hand that stroked the goose that sat in her lap. Other geese sauntered in the yard. They flapped their wings and honked when we approached them. Sometimes they chased us. During those late afternoon visits, we kids spent most of the time on the playground in front of the orphanage, on the seesaw, the slide, and the creaky merry-go-round with the younger boys. Or we played the tag or hide and seek with the older boys. Sometimes we ventured to the edge of the forest to hide behind enormous tree trunks, and the forest palpitated with our repressed laughter and the excitement to be found. Before it got dark, my mother called us, and we reluctantly headed back to our cabin. Most of the boys were kind and sweet. They spoke Italian to us, but switched to the thick sing-song rhythm of their mysterious dialect when they spoke between themselves or to the nuns. That summer together, we made a world where we forgot the adults who ruled our lives, whether through their presence or their absence. But we were so different from those boys. We ate spaghetti with freshly made tomato sauce, no chunks, and grated caciocavallo my mother had brought from Gela because it was our favorite cheese. When she made veal cutlets a bagnomaria, she trimmed the fat off and beat the meat with a mallet until it was almost transparent, or we wouldn't eat it. As preoccupied as she was with my baby sister, she made sure we ate well and tucked us in at night. I wasn't one of 60 orphan boys who had no parents, who cooked for them, kissed them goodnight, or scolded them if they forgot to brush their teeth. On Sundays, the playground crowded with adults from the outside world, grandparents, aunts, uncles, fathers, and mothers too poor to keep their children home. I lingered on the borders of the playground, a curious and shy spectator. A heightened emotional current saturated the air. The boys looked younger and vulnerable. They were no longer the kids with whom I played all day long during the week. I realized then the depth of the solitude and sadness they carried, and that most of them, certainly Dario, masked so well. I didn't know whether Dario had lost one or both parents. He never spoke of his family. I don't remember anyone ever visiting him, and didn't know how long he had lived at the orphanage. Though it must have been a few years. You saw it, from the way he walked, how he talked to the nuns, to the other boys, like someone was at home in this strange place. Sometimes, though, I would catch a shadow across his face. It wasn't sadness. It was something hard, like the anger that marred my father's face when we didn't listen to him. There was a lot of crying when relatives and parents left. All the boys cried, even the teenagers. Some wandered wide-eyed and lost on the semi-deserted playground. One day, my uncle, aunt, and cousins came to visit. They brought ice cream. One of the adults instructed us not to let the orphans see us, or the boys would feel bad. Why couldn't we buy ice cream for the boys, too? I thought. But I didn't have the courage to ask. I remember when Luigi, a scrawny boy of 11 or 12, had shared the chocolate wafers his mother had brought him with us. I licked the ice cream slowly until it bled into the cone. I chewed the mess. The wafer stuck to the roof of my mouth. That summer, my mother was less strict than at home. Except for meals, sleep, and washing once a day, she had relinquished the care of us girls aged 9, 11, and 13 to that place. Our skin became tanned and tough, marked by scratches and bruises from when we ran and fell in the forest in the morning and when we played with the boys. After lunch, we escaped nap time and sneaked out of the sleeping house. We crossed a dusty country road and ran downhill all the way to the big almond tree that had become our meeting point. We twisted the almonds, pulled hard the seesaw with the reluctant tree. Most almonds were not yet ripe. The green shells were still soft. Some we could crush with the palm of our hands. If they started hardening, though, we had to crack them with our teeth. One afternoon, our talk slow and lazy from the heat, my older sister turned to Dario and, flashing her most seductive smile, said, "A chi ti vuoi sposare di noi tre?" My heart skipped a beat as I waited for Dario to say which one of us He wanted to marry. I sat in the tree, swinging my legs, caressing almonds. The small mound of green felt alive in my lap. Dario looked at me, lifting his chin lightly. "È mica una creatura," he said, slipping into the Sicilian tongue. Creatura, creature. That's how the adults refer to babies. Dario had reasonably narrowed his choice, stated the obvious. I had seen the admiration in his eyes when he watched my brassy sister and my blushing blonde blue-eyed cousin. Yet all along I felt it belonged to me. Now I saw myself through his eyes, short hair, thick glasses, knobby knees, no hint of puberty, the graceless, shy follower of my sister and cousin. I made as if I was not paying attention. I chose with care one almond, held it between thumb and index finger, and studied it. Then placed it between my molars and cracked it open. I extracted the fragments of the crushed almond and placed them one at a time in my mouth. Then chewed the tender skin hard, grinding my teeth. So much beauty and sadness permeated the haunting summer when the orphan boy taught us about the creature that haunted the forest, half man, half wolf. Wolves were familiar creatures on an island where mothers and grandmothers rocked children to sleep, singing lullabies that threatened to give the children away to the black wolf lest they fall asleep. Nina, na, Nina. A lullaby as ancient as our Greek ancestors. Women have always known the feral beasts lurk nearby. I knew about lupi mannari, the half-human, half-beast creatures that terrorize people on full moon nights. It was the orphan of Piazza Armerina, however, who taught me about that lore that must have spoken to them with the power and veracity that I, a child with parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and neighbors who doted on me, could not understand. Werewolves were taller than regular humans and could run both standing and all fours. No one could outrun them. You should never be out alone on a full moon night, or the lupo mannaro could snatch you and devour you piece by piece. You had to be smart and go out in a pack with boys who knew how to elude those terrifying beasts. They were sad, unfortunate creatures too, the lupi mannari. It was the moon that woke the dormant beast. Their human form returned at dawn. When they woke up, all blooded, they had only vague memories of what had transpired, like a bad dream. During the day, they were regular men, decent husbands, loving fathers. But when the moon was full, especially if it was red, beware, they could kill their own children. We listened to the stories of the werewolves in terrified silence. Only my sister, with her usual bravado, said she didn't believe in werewolves. Dario smiled. Did you want to see the lupo mannaro? All we had to do is meet the boys near the orphanage 3 nights from now. They will show us. With them, we will be safe. On the night of August 8th, a big, round red moon hung in the sky. I was so nervous I could not eat. I kept glancing at my sister and cousin. My cousin, incapable of lying, blushed and smiled too much. But my sister, master of all situations, chatted with my mother and aunt and distracted them. She got up to clear the table without being reminded. My mother changed the baby for the night, and we all got into our pajamas. We waited until the rhythmic sound of the sleeping bodies and the cicadas outside was all we could hear. We crawled out of bed, got dressed, and shoes in hand climbed out of the window my sister had left ajar. Once we were a few meters away from the cabin, we ran. The strangest animal cries accompanied us. The glow of the moon was a searchlight on the darkened road. The distance between the cabin and the orphanage seemed to have grown since we had left the orphanage a few hours earlier. Wait, my sister hissed as I ran ahead. I reluctantly slowed down until she and my cousin caught up with me. A dozen boys waited 100 feet from the bulky, haunting mass of the orphanage. Its features had been swallowed by the night. Our silhouettes were all heavy breath and suppressed laughter, smell of fear and excitement. I could hear the muffled voices of my sister and my cousin, but couldn't see them. I heard Dario's laughter, and then it all went quiet. The nocturnal creatures that had been crying to us went mute too. When the howl came, it was deep, long, pained, unearthly. We shrieked, then pressed our hands over our mouths, looking left, right, behind. The howl continued as if it had been released from a sealed well of sorrow, raw and thick and ancient. Not the sorrow of one creature, but the sorrow of all the sad men and boys of the world. Breathless, we listened as it crawled towards us. A shape emerged from the darkness, making fierce animal sounds, screaming. The kids scattered everywhere. I stood there, mesmerized. I could not make the creature's contours out. It seemed clumsy, as if it struggled to orient itself. A hand grabbed me. Come, a boy's voice said, run! We ran in silence, broken only by the heaviness of our breath and the thumping of feet, not just ours. Finally, my companion stopped behind the tree, a signal to me to squat. In the shadow, I recognized Dario. He brought his finger to his lips. I nodded. My knees pressed against the bark. I felt the trunk with my hands. Its rough solidity was impenetrable and reassuring. My right arm extended along its circumference. I could not reach around it. I inhaled its smell. It must have been one of those ancient pines, the top of which was barely visible during the day. We ran all the way to the forest. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. The thick shapes of the trees looked like giants willing to give us refuge. My left thigh pressed against Dario's. The red ball of the moon looked at us through the branches. The howl continued, lonely and desperate, but I stayed at the edge of the forest. The other children were whispers I heard amidst the sounds of the night, harsh, jarring, so different from the music of the forest at dawn. There were no mothers, no aunts, no nuns. We were not children. We were small animals, wild with fear. The howl was no longer feral, just a weak cry for help. It sounded closer. The night breeze rushed between my scrawny legs. Dario turned towards me. His eyes gleamed. In the dark, I couldn't see his nose, his mouth, only the shape of his head. Would he too turn into a werewolf? The cold hand of the night caressed my spine. I shivered and closed my eyes. When I opened them, his eyes had disappeared, but I heard and smelled his breath, fast, sweet. Someone called my name. Where are you? Where are you? It was my sister. She sounded scared. Dove sei? I stayed quiet. The sounds of a struggle rose and fell near me, sudden, abrupt, uneven. Then the thump of feet running away from me. Other noises mingled with those wild sounds, flapping of wings, hooting, screeching, scraping. Something was being dragged. The thumping stopped. I pressed myself against the trunk of the old pine, flattened my torso as if the tree could draw my skin inside its cortex, then slid my feet, pressing toes into the soil and the exposed roots, my legs wrapped around the tree base. The sting of scratches was on my thighs, knees, sandaled feet, arms. The base of my neck burned. I didn't know where the fire came from. Perhaps from inside me. A boy's cry from a distance, a cry of despair and surrender. Was it Darius? I mouthed his name, then crawled on all fours in the direction of the cry. The leaves lifted off the ground and began to cover me. My teeth beat my lip hard, and I tasted my own blood. I held my breath. The forest took me. Thank you.